Welcome to the Scale with Strive podcast, the place where you come to listen to some of the world's most influential leaders of the SaaS industry. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, and on today's episode, we're joined by Philippe Humeau, a trained engineer who ventured into the world of entrepreneurialism from the age of 23. Having previously exited his company around 7 years ago, he's gone on to co-found Crowdsec. Crowdsec is a Series A cybersecurity company that leverages the power of community to drive value for their customers. Throughout his career, he's worn a number of hats from CEO, CTO, CSO, and CMO. So it's really clear that this individual is a true all-rounder. Philip has a unique way of taking complicated subject matters such as cybersecurity and making them sound really simple so that you and I can understand. Some of the key takeaways that I think will resonate with you today are lessons learned from global expansion, the difference between trading in EMEA and expanding into the US, his thoughts on product-led growth versus sales-led growth, and all there is to know when it comes to C-suite hiring. I really enjoyed the conversation with Philip today. I hope you do too. Now let's dive in. So Philip, welcome to the Scale with Strive podcast. Thank you very much for giving up your time today, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise, Adam. I'm really glad to be here.
Good stuff. So, I suppose to kick things off for the listeners, it'd be great if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and a bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Philippe, based in France. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crowdsec. We'll discuss more about this later. And in my past experiences, I'm a trained engineer from school, and then I became an entrepreneur as of 23 years old. It was always in my blood, and I decided to sell my previous company 7 years ago, and created a new one 3 years ago. So I've been in offensive cybersecurity, defensive cybersecurity, occupied multiple seats ranging from CTO, CSO, CMO. I like to be an all-rounder, good at a lot, expert at nothing.
Yeah. Well, no, I had a good look through your profile, and there was some interesting points I wanted to discuss with you. I think I noticed that you graduated from university. I think you did was it a security engineer or computer science degree, something like that. And it seems like you went straight into the world of becoming an entrepreneur. So quite similar to myself, really. I had a couple of years in employment, and then since my early 20s, I've been working for myself. So I'm always keen to understand, like, why, what drove you to get straight into the mix.
Yeah, I think it narrows down to the fact that I'd say roughly 5% of the population, DNA-wise, is made to be in a leadership position. If you think about it like horses, there's always a horse leading the others behind. He's always super attentive, looking all around the place, being a bit more tired than the other, but he's leading the herd. And Mother Nature found out that if everyone tries to get the herd somewhere, the group would die. If no one does this, the group would die. And that the only combination that would lead to a favorable outcome for the group is to have one leader and a lot of people collaborating together to make this work. As a matter of fact, we're not good at other things, right, that the group can provide us with. So it's a relationship where we learn and help each other, where one is taking the risk and running in front and gathering a group with him to get stronger all together. So I think this 5% is roughly what you will find in the population nowadays, but it comes back from long time ago. There were like already 5% of the people in the cave saying, hey, we should go now to hunt for new mammoth or whatever,
Yeah. And I suppose that like confidence to become an entrepreneur, where does that come from? Is it, parents, did they have an influence on it? Was there anyone in your early life that sort of set, the path or give you the confidence to do that?
Well, I'd say my mother was someone very autonomous and had her own life and fostered us into thinking that we can have our own path in life. My father was a doctor, so not really much an entrepreneur per se. But a lot of my family, on one side of the family, everybody nearly became an entrepreneur. I think it scratched me as of 16 years old. I was like, okay, mom, dad, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to have my own company. And they were like, they did the only thing they should do, responsible parents should do, and said, you should finish your study first. I was like, okay, that's fair. So I finished my study and became an entrepreneur right away.
And seeing as though we're talking about your early life, I have been doing my homework on you, Philip, and I believe that you started your experience within the cybersecurity space from the age of 10. I believe you've been hacking computers, computer games, and you turned your hand to hacking from quite a young age. So I'm interested to learn about that.
Well, to be very honest, I was a kid. I was trying things. Hacking is maybe a big word here, but yeah, I was interested into having those games and trying them. It was the booming of the early days of the video game industries. So there were barely lines on the screens moving, but we loved it with my friends. And I was in touch with this Atari and Amiga scene where the guys were providing us a cracked game. Sometimes we had to adjust things ourselves, so dealing with a bit of code here and there. But some other guys were doing the heavy lifting. And as a matter of fact, later on, when I was like 19 and I joined my engineering school, I happened to meet a guy whose name was usually waving on the logos, of those cracked games when I was 10. Like, wow, it was you? And the guy was like, yeah, it was me. I did this in the past. I was like, but you were then 10, like me, because you're the same age now. So you had to be the same age back then, right? He was like, yeah, I was 10. So back then, 10 years old, you were cracking games already? What did you do after? Well, I could do this and that and that. And what are you doing now? I'm doing cybersecurity. Oh, show me the rabbit hole. Show it to me. I so want it. So this is how, I jumped into cybersecurity, because then, making computers do absolutely not what they're programmed for and bring them to other thoughts was so fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. And I suppose, being so technically minded from such a young age and having that real curiosity to get stuck into computers and the whole world of computer science. I suppose that's been a big driving force and set you off on a career which has been really heavily focused within that space.
Oh yeah. Then you're in. The game is on. There is not much legislation and law framework. It's pretty much a virgin field where you can express yourself and try your chance and so on. So back then you had two choices. Either you would go rogue and be a black hat, so someone making money on the black market to hack into computers, or you would be a white hat. And since I wanted to sleep tight at night, I didn't want to go the rogue route, and I became a white hat. So I did this for a contract for money for different companies, and we bridged in and told them where we bridged in, how. Now it's very, very classical, but pen testing back then was fairly new, and we had to convince them that it was for their greater good, that we would try to break in, show them where and how, and that they would then, compensate, patch, fix things so that they are properly secure for the next year or so. But it was a great time.
Yeah, and so I suppose in terms of your professional career, then you've had quite a number of high profile success stories, particularly like your first venture straight out of university. And since then, you've become an investor, you've been involved in multiple business, and you've looked to develop your skill sets as a more rounded entrepreneur and business person. But I'd be interested to hear about the journey of, just a short overview of your first venture that you did and how you got into it, and I suppose the exit.
Yeah, so lots of mistakes here, I would say. The first one was more like I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had no clue what it was about. So I had technical skills, but no business skills. I had no contact in the industry. So it was like starting a car in a big slope like this in fifth gear, and you would take speed very slowly. But hey, we were autonomous, independent. It was our own company. There was some compensation for that. So over time, I switched from being a pure pen tester to becoming more like a CTO, to organizing, and we started to have clients willing to be defended against cyber criminals. So the thing is, transitioning from one to the other was it was heartbreaking on the one end, but on the other end, it was the only reasonable choice, because if you do only services like this, on the spot service, then company may not call you back for a year or two before they create another pen test campaign. So we were constantly hunting for our own food. We're constantly chasing contracts. So over time, we started to create something more robust, having some fixed income, recurring income, coming from clients willing to be hosted, willing to be defended. and we would accompany them on the long run. Then someone better than me took over the CTO seat, and I became a CMO, a CSO first, and then a CMO. So really turned toward business like 10 years in. And that was a great choice, I would say, because being weathered in technical aspects and then learning my trade into business aspects made me now a complete entrepreneur. So creating my second company, I do two sides of two faces, one looking at business, one looking at technical things. And I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, I'd say as a recruiter, that's one of the challenges we face, particularly working with really early stage startups. When they've got a super technical founder, they're a first-time founder, they've not necessarily got the commercial acumen. And when it comes to hiring commercial people, particularly within go-to-market, that's where you start to see the importance of having good people around you to fill in those gaps.
Founders, I'd say, as an entrepreneur, but also as an investor, I'd say there's one thing I see as a common silver lining into those companies that are successful. Try to be three founders, three co-founders, not two, not four, not five. Two, you will end up fighting at some point or disagree or whatever. Solo, it's terrible. Like, never do that. Like, really for yourself already, never do that. Two is complicated. It's a balance that will work for a certain amount of time, but will fail at some point, obviously, because, life happens. Then three is very stable because you can have like one dealing with CEO, like being CTO, the other being CMO, whatever, but you cover already like 3 out of 5 key points in your C-suites. And then four is, again, a stalemate if there's any problem or someone dominant and the other not being at the same level. And five, common. It's not an alumni, okay? It's a company. So if you want a party, you make it with your friends, don't make it a company. So three to me is really the optimal lineup of founders.
Okay, well, yes, interesting point. So that leads us on to Crowdsec then. I suppose for those that are listening that aren't familiar with Crowdsec, it'd be really good if you could just explain to us, I suppose, who they are, what your product is, what problems you solve, and I suppose how you solve it, because it's quite a unique approach to cybersecurity, harnessing a collective of people, from my understanding.
Yeah. So, well, we all tried or still use Waze, right? So Waze used to tell you, and it's still telling you, where are the road hazards, the speed traps, the problems, and whatever happens on the roads when there's slowdown, jams, and so on. And it only works because this system is gathering the vehicle position, its heading, its speed. And based on that, on a large number of partakers, you can calculate where are the problems, right? We do the exact same thing for digital highways. So we are ways of firewalls, meaning your machine are defending themselves individually, and then globally are sharing signals of aggression they receive. And when they receive an aggression, we check if this aggression is coming from an IP address that is seen by a lot of other members, vetted members. And if it's the case, we distribute this IP address in a block list to everyone in return. So meaning this is getting stronger together. This is a crowdsource effect, a network effect, where everyone is defending everyone else. And I think it's the only way we can fold cybercrime at scale. Specifically now already, it's very, very intense. Like if you take any IP address on the internet, it scans roughly 2,000 times per day. Like the average one, like your IP address at home is scanned 2,000 times a day. It's not a problem because it's run by your telco company, so nothing is exposed, whatever. But if you have like a meaningful website or whatever, it can ramp up to 4,000 times, 6,000 times. But this, Adam, is pre-AI. And I'm not like this AI zealot saying that the doomsday are coming. Just factually, I know that there are people as we speak training offensive cybersecurity AI, where they will push a button and a very well-trained AI will try everything it can to breach in. So what we see as thousands of attempts per day will quickly ramp up to tens of thousands of attempts per day because of the AI coming in. So yeah, it's a massive problem we're trying to tackle, and we think the only way of doing it is doing it in a crowdsourced way.
Yeah. So I used to recruit engineers like many years ago, and one of the things I always like looked at is an engineer's ability to make something very complex and explain it in a very simple term. And I think you've just absolutely nailed that, Philip. So hats off to you. And I think using the analogy with ways is like just makes it very crystal clear. So thank you. I suppose, yeah, obviously you've got a really strong pedigree within security, but I'd still love to understand like how did you come up with the idea and the concept? Like, was this a Monday morning shower, light bulb moment, or was this something that you developed over a period of time with a group of people?
I like to think that the best businesses, most of them are not like shower ideas, like, wow, eureka. That happens, obviously, but most of the time it comes from someone very weathered in the field and they think like, okay, this problem is recurring. How do we solve it? And at some point, you have enough experience, you have luck, you have the proper people around you, you start thinking through and you find a solution. For us, it was, we had a client called Intersport, very large sport brand, I think from Germany. And the guys were hosted in my previous company in a high security environment that we created. And it was working fine. It was heavy thing, it was like, it took 2 months to put a client in production, but hey, it was working. And at some point, this client during the Olympic Games had an attack. And the guys were trying to breach into the website to actually probably blackmail them or something like this, because it was a peak moment for selling. And actually, the defenses worked really well. We were proud of that. So first of all, beer, popcorn, the classical. But we were like, okay, what do we make with those IP addresses that were aggressive? Because we know for a fact those IP addresses try to breach into the customer place, right? So they are handled by a cyber criminal organization of some sort. Who should we tell? How do we deal with this information? It's precious somehow. How do we, leverage that for the greatest number to be protected? We're like, okay, well, in terms of legal aspects, it's not so easy. In terms of organization, why people would trust us, who would use that, and so on. So we faced a wall, but we had 6,000 IP addresses that were super aggressive at that time, and we're like, that's a waste to put it into garbage can.
Yeah,
do something about it. And we started to draw on the board the first inception of what Crowdsec would become. So instead of being like a company hosting things for itself, it would be a self-defense mechanism, open source, mind you, that we would distribute to the largest number and that we would collaborate together. And the signals coming out of this network would be our value, our what we sell to others. So it's a hybrid model, I would call it, business model, in between open source that is free, because we want no friction to adoption, because the network effect is about having the biggest possible network. And on the other end, finding the way to monetize them so that VCs are trusting us, lending us money, and that we can move forward and build up the company.
Yeah. Okay. Now it makes sense. And I suppose just to sort of give some context behind Crowdsec and where you're at, do you want to just talk us through sort of where you're at in terms of numbers? So in terms of your funding, I believe you've had around 21.5 million euros Series A you're at currently. You've had some big profile VCs backing you, the likes of Supernova and BPI France, a couple that we're familiar with. And where are you at in terms of like your headcount and revenues and stuff like that, in terms of the size of the business right now?
So you're right, and we rose in total something like 22 million euros. We are 34 headcount internally. We recently built our C-suite lineup, and we'll discuss more about this. And we are working in 180 different countries. So people are using the product in 180 different countries, and we have something like 230,000 installations of the product. So we are scaling extremely quickly, very, very quickly. Which poses some challenges, but it's a very interesting landscape. Yeah.
So did you say 180 or 118 countries?
180 countries, yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. So there's been like rapid adoption globally, then, really. Let's just talk just in terms of the markets, then. So I know we've been helping particularly with EMEA and now the US as well. So in terms of the plans, then, what's your focus in terms of the markets that you're trying to really tap into?
Yeah, it's funny because I had those conversations lately with people providing, trade shows and so on in France, and I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not buying, because France is not specifically my market. I love my country, it's not a problem, but it's not specifically my market. It's not so educated. and the government is fairly slow to move in this direction. It's very heavy. It's full of red tape. So working specifically in France doesn't make sense. So for us, EMEA was the first main target globally, France included, but globally. And specifically, we think Germany and England are fast movers in these landscapes in cybersecurity. Germany is a kingmaker in open source in a general way. And England is a very, very good ground for starting to commercialize a product because you guys are risk takers. You try, you check, you test, and the regulation framework around contracts is looser than in Europe or in France. So if you have a contract and you're not happy with your provider, you take the contract, you do up like this, you tear it off, you move on. In France, it's more complicated. So I think it allows you to be faster iterating on what is good, what is not for the company. As in the US is a key market. It's the mother of all markets for pretty much everything. But in cybersecurity, it's 10 times true. So I'd say US for us is a kingmaker as well. So if we land a big contract, 2, 3, 4 in the US, it helps worldwide to develop the company brand, logo, and so on.
And there's a lot of European founders that we speak to that are in a situation like yourself that are looking at the prospect of going across the pond and expanding into the US. And we've helped them do it from a talent perspective. But I suppose as a founder and a leader within the business, I imagine a lot of people would love to know, like, I suppose what your experience has been like so far. And I know this isn't like your first rodeo. What's your experience been like of taking your business international and going across to the US in particular? Because it's such a focus for so many startups right now. If I think about like Israeli security startups, for example, the pattern I see is they go straight to the US and then come back in terms of their expansion. So how's it been for you?
So if you take the US, there are pros and cons. The main pro is it will teach you business. US is efficient like no other country in the world regarding business. We all know that, but the truth is you have a 20-minute rendezvous with a high-profile account, 20-minute maximum. Okay, so in 20 minutes you should deliver your value, your core value, what you really are bringing to the company in like 5 minutes max, and they will instantly assess whether they need you or not. It's efficiency pushed at its maximum. So this is a testing ground for you like no other. You should be ready before you get there with your pitch, with your deck, with everything. Don't go heavy on slide and so on. People just want to understand the value. They don't care about how you do it. They just want to know what you bring at the table for what money. The second thing is, I think if you are in cybersecurity like I am, any company, any large company, any Fortune 500 company will get roughly 3,000 demands per year of rendezvous and so on. And they will only make around 200, 300 POCs, which is already crazy, right? So if you try to reach, say, Citibank, they have 3,000 demand. They will accept only probably 500 rendezvous online, and they will end up doing 200 POCs. So you have to be 1 in 10, 1 in 15 to go through the grid. So you'd better be extremely ready for that. But on the other hand, it's a very rewarding market. The people are also fast movers. They know how to take risks. They know how to identify an opportunity, something new on the market. It's not scary for them. Where a lot of the European mindset is too stiff to actually try something. They are late adopters. They are not early adopters. So US is a kingmaker because if you make it there, you can make it anywhere, like the song says.
Yeah. And have you prioritized specific states or time zones? How have you gone about it?
Yeah, so listen, we're going to have a strong campaign starting 4 days from now in the Silicon Valley. So it's an exclusive. We're going to have billboards in the Silicon Valley. Yeah, good old billboards. Because there's no way you can get a better cost per thousand print in the heads of people. So it's all about the messaging. And if one place on earth understands the network effect, it's Silicon Valley, right? So we go through the heart of it directly to San Francisco. Because this is where everything still happens nowadays, even though Texas is ramping up, Austin and so on. I think like the Valley is still a place to be. I'd call it also Texas, and I'd say in cybersecurity specifically, Maryland and the area of Boston are already super important. But if you think US, think about the fact, like, for example, France is roughly the size of Texas, slightly bigger, but not much more, right? And there are 50 states. So it's a massive country spanning 4 time zones. So everything is very specialized in the US. If you want to touch the financial sector, go for New York, right? If you want to touch IT and everything, go for the Valley. If you want to touch R&D, go for Boston. And so on forth. If you're on the three letters agency, go into Maryland and so on forth. So you really need to study this ground before taking a decision of hiring a person here or here or there, because they will need to move anyway. So I have someone in Arkansas. I know he will never get directly in touch with a client in Arkansas, or very few of them. He would have to go to Frisco, he would have to go to New York, he would have to go to Austin. So think twice about landing physically, putting a foot in the land where you want to be, where you want it to be.
You mentioned in terms of your marketing with billboards, that I went to San Francisco last year to a conference, and we were like meeting with customers of ours, and that was one of the first things that stood out to me. As I couldn't believe the amount of billboards where tech companies were advertising. I don't think I'd seen it in any other city, and it was so prominent. So it's interesting that you've sort of cottoned on to that, and that's an approach that you're going for. I suppose in terms of like, where are you at in your journey right now then? So I know we're going to talk about your sort of your leadership team, but this is your second proper venture where where you founded. You clearly got a successful product. It's unique, it's disruptive, it's offering value. But in terms of where you are in your journey right now, then how would you describe where you're at so
far? Education stage. So because the game in the cybersecurity industry, not only cybersecurity industry, is a Simon Say game, right? So you have Gartner, Forrester, and all the other communication agencies. They are saying, okay, Simon Say you have to buy this today. All right, let's buy this, right? And Simon didn't say what you don't have to buy or what else is on the market. So if you're a Fortune 500 and you are crowded with a lot of demands, you will listen to the Simon Say game a lot. And the problem for us is if you have a blue ocean strategy, so you bring something new at the market with a new go-to-market, a new product, a new angle, the biggest problem you will have on the short term is to educate the landscape that you do exist and you solve a problem, right? And this is where we still are at that stage. We are selling, we are expanding, we are growing our network, but to me, we are still in the educational stage. So we need to make people understand something obvious. Something to us that is obvious. Like, if you are a super soldier fighting against an army, you will lose 100% time. No matter how well you're equipped, if you fight 100 people, they're just in Hollywood, you can win this fight. In reality, you will just lose it. The only way you can win a war is by having a larger army. When I tell this, it sounds obvious, but in cybersecurity, it's not. Collaboration across several entities, brings like scare, fears, like are we sharing with our competitors or things like this, which they are not, obviously. But so a lot of education here that this angle needs to be explored and is a very, very efficient one, because we already have the first metrics about how efficient the product is, and it's tremendous. For large accounts like we have in the US testing the product, usually they know around 10, 15, 20% of the data we're giving them, like about who is aggressive over the internet, what IP addresses. They are extremely sophisticated accounts. They have a lot of CTI feeds, a lot of input to decide this. Yet they ignore 85% of the danger that the crowd can tell them about. So we are still in this stage, to me. That's why we launched the Academy recently.
And I wanted to ask about that. So I wanted to ask you about the Academy. Before we move on to that, again, as a recruiter, we work with a lot of early stage startups where a big part of like our job is bringing in reps to help evangelize the market, as well as obviously sell. So what, if I'm a founder listening to this podcast and I'm at that stage of the business where it's all around educating the market, educating the customers and showing them like what the product can do, because there's nothing else out there, there's a delay in terms of like, it's delayed gratification. There's a lot of work that goes in, and then you start to see adoption. How are you seeing it at the moment in terms of timelines and patterns? Are you seeing more? Are you expecting more of a hockey stick motion in terms of like how you're going to accelerate? Like what are you expecting and what you're seing right now?
So yeah, so you're absolutely right, Adam. And it's two different strategies here. So we've been selected in a group of startup, a cohort in Google, which is cybersecurity startups in Europe, blah, blah, blah. So we are 15. I'm very glad with this collaboration we have with Google. But we see that the early stage, like in seed stage companies, they are often trying to reach this 50,000 euros, pound, whatever, dollar per month to say, okay, we have this traction in the market, we have a product market fit, so we can go for a round, we're ready. But it's really sales driven. So they are scrapping the landscape a lot until they are grinding, until they get their first contract and so on. Now, we took a very, very different orientation. And so far, I can tell if I take these 14 other companies in the cohort, we are the only one doing this. So I cannot tell your listeners it's the only good strategy. Not even if it's a good strategy, we'll see it over time. But yes, the hockey stick, you're right. So my point of view about that is marketing, communication and marketing. Why? Because say if you do advertisement, say it's an example, right? You will spend a lot of money and you have to fuel the machine constantly. If you do communication, say content marketing, it takes more time before it's really efficient and pays itself off. But this is a long-lasting effect. It will last for years, right? If you do great content. Like if you stop the advertisement budget, tomorrow you don't have any more leads. So the way we decided to structure it early on is to go very heavily on the marketing front, on the communication front. And now we start to harvest the fruit. So the hockey stick example you took is extremely good because at first you invest in this at loss until you start, building momentum, as opposed to sales effort, which can be paying off right away, but you will constantly need to fuel the fire. Otherwise, said, I prefer inbound leads to outbound leads.
Yeah. And I'm seeing, if I think about over the last few years, so you've had COVID, unprecedented times, 2021, absolute bounce back, went nuts, everyone hired, VC money was being thrown around like it was going out of fashion. 2022, you started to see the cracks appear. And then obviously this year, it's been a bit of a bloodbath globally from an economic situation. What I've seen off the back of that is a big emphasis on being more efficient with your go-to-market and using more of like a product-led growth motion rather than like human capital, just using a huge amount of resource into PLG. So how's that sort of fit with your strategy?
So you're absolutely right. We speak here about SLG versus PLG. So PLG, for the listener, is product-led growth. So basically, your product is selling itself, which is very true for Crowdsec and the open source business in general way. Your product is convincing bottom-up personas. So the ICP is, you define your ICP, and when you start reaching it, you're like, okay, I need to go from here to there, and the people understand what we do, and they want more of it, and so on, and we start selling premium features. As opposed to SLG, sales-led growth, where you have guys in the field trying to reach out to clients, say, okay, guys, we do something different here. You should look at it because we'll definitely do better, and so on and so forth. So I think for us, it's all a matter of balancing the three strategies. So we have PLG on the one end, which is a bottom-up strategy, which we use low-touch sales motion for that. So it's marketing-led sales. So it's online, right? You put a credit card and you get extra services. We think under the $15,000 barrier per year, you should go into this automation of sales marketing-wise. Above this line in the sand, which is around 15,000, and pretty much everyone agrees around this number, you should go like rather SLG. So really with a sales team that will be behind the clients with BDR, SDR, account executive, pre-sales, and so on, all that jazz. So we use those two strategies, and in parallel, a third one, which is since we have a herd of data coming out from the network, we also resell them directly through a partnership system, because the market is already structured in this direction. So if you're, say, a bank and you want to buy another CTI feed, usually turn to your usual broker of feeds, right? You don't directly buy them from the provider, not always at least. So we also have a partnership system.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, it's good to see, particularly with like an open source product, how much that would like feed into it. So you mentioned before about the Crowdsec Academy, and I was having a look into that before our conversation today. So I was really keen to understand how something like an initiative like that feeds into your overall business strategy. Like, what's its purpose, what's the objective, and how's this making the boat go faster?
So that has been crazy. And by the way, you recruited this guy for us. Thank you for that. It's called Jack. Jack and Courtney, by the way, his boss was also coming from Strive. Thank you for that again.
I can't take any credit for that. That's shout out to Max and the team. So
no, they were great, and thank you to them publicly in the podcast. So yeah, so those two, they decided to go for an academy. We wanted to have this academy for a while to educate people because I told you we're in this education phase. But this thing took momentum like hell. It's crazy. I mean, it became, I wouldn't say out of control because we're happy about it and we are fueling the fire as much as we can. But so
yeah, it's a good problem to have.
Yes, absolutely. But the thing is, to me, success is planned, right? So everything that happens that is good for your business has been planned at some point, carefully crafted. Here we thought that would be great to have an academy. That would be great to create content, video content, to help people use the product, to be also more aware about cybersecurity, to train themselves and so on, because it's a community thing we are bringing at the table. So that made sense. Now we were taken by storm. We didn't think it would take so much momentum in such a few period of time. So what happened is...
Well, you always need a bit of luck. You always need a bit of luck behind you.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, what made it a success in the first place? Why did this thing pick so much momentum? So first thing is this academy is relying on an AI system that will generate a virtual avatar that will speak with a great tone of voice. Lip syncing is perfect. So you can drop any line of text to it, and it will animate your text and with a very efficient posture. Then you drop your slides if you have some or video, and mash it up together, drop it online, and then you have all the gamification, all the rewards, all the everything, And then what happened is people were like, okay, I can proudly tell I got my Crowdsec validation, and they posted it on LinkedIn, and it became viral. They were like, oh, there's a training course to take and we can get a grade. Let's do it. And you know what? In a week, literally in a week, and we had 1,000 people taking the course. We're like,
right, wow.
What? And they were all, most of them were posting their diploma on LinkedIn, and then other came in because they saw the diploma. I need to have it as well. And then some VCs and some experts in the field were like, guys, you're filling a gap that is tremendous because people need to educate themselves on cybersecurity. There's a shortage of skills of around the magnitude of time 2 or time 3. So if you're filling the gap with educational content, you're in the right track, in the right direction. We're like, yeah, actually, you're right. We should diversify the content of the academy just for the sake of training a lot of experts in the field, because the field is in so many hands that they don't have. So yeah, the academy is a priority project now internally, and we love absolutely the feedback we have. And it's the only project in my life I have zero negative feedback about. Like, there's always someone complaining, a troll or whatever. Never, ever have had it happen in my life that had nothing but great comments like, oh, that's fantastic, go on, create content. So, content creation can take many alleys. We do blog posts, we do LinkedIn posts and so on, but I think the one that is a big, big time hit nowadays is definitely the videos online. And mind you, they are pretty long. They are like 40 minutes. So people are ready to sit, listen, and learn. And yeah, it's critical success.
And is that something that you're offering for free, so it's completely accessible, or is it something that you're monetizing?
No, it's absolutely free, like the product, but the monetization angle is never very far. We are still a business at the core of it, so we need to monetize something. So what we do is, like, those people are trained, they learn, they carry the flag for us. They start advertising on Crowdsec. More people are installing the free product, and it's up to us to make the free product and the paid version different enough so that people take the hike to the freemium version or to the enterprise version. But the more the merrier. And I'll tell you a secret here, Adam, and it's not so much of a secret, to be honest. It's a heist. It's not a company. It's never been, right? So we are in for a $1 billion heist. And if I'm looking at it, with a bit of credibility, we'll never reach this valuation within a 3-4 year time frame, because you will need to build $180 or $120 million yearly in revenue so that you value this amount of money. But there are exceptions. There are shortcuts, and Waze was one. And it's a great example for us in many fronts. And in the business front, it's one. So what happened is Waze was acquired by Google for $970 million, something like this, because they had an asset. Their yearly revenue was marginal, but they had a critical asset to Google: the real-time map of all the roads and their state at the scale of the world. That's absolutely insane as a generation of data on a daily basis. Crowdsec is doing the exact same thing, the exact same strategy. We are generating the real-time map of all the IP addresses used by cyber criminals. So my play is definitely an asset play as opposed to a yearly revenue play. So obviously we have to make revenue, but for us, it's more important that the network is growing at a steady pace rather than our revenue. So both needs to be balanced because we are still we have a P&L at the end of the year. But growing the network is already growing our value anyway.
Yeah. And so we've talked about it's great to like your vision and I suppose your exit strategy there, and the value of Crowdsec. We've talked about some of the look and the positive response that you had to the academy. One of the things which I think a lot of people would love to hear is some of the challenges that you've faced that you maybe didn't expect. Obviously, this is just it's not your first time that you founded a business, but what challenges have you faced so far that you maybe didn't expect or you didn't foresee from past experiences?
When you have experience, or at least I did this mistake, you think that you compress time with experience, which is only partially true, because there is just that many shortcuts you can take. And educating the market will always take time, no matter how experienced or good you are at it. If you're bringing a breakthrough product, a really innovative product, don't expect you can educate the market in less than 2 or 3 years. I don't think we made heavy mistakes on that front. We did other mistakes, but probably not on that front. And it still takes us roughly 3 years to have a huge momentum at scale. So if you're not an expert in communication marketing, I would say it could take up to 4 years probably. So never expect that you can take a shortcut here, because the market is just that big and it will need that much time to actually consider you. So no matter what is your horizon, below 3 years is not really happening. The other thing is, I would say, you have to call out the market and be savvy economy-wise, because if you can call when the market will crumble, fall, or expand, and so on, you're in a better position. It's not that there is less money in the system. Actually, there is less money, and in Q1 2024, it's expected that the VCs will really shrink the number of investment they will make. Now, the thing is, they will not stop investing. They will just invest in less businesses, more money. And so by cherry picking like this, you need to be one off. So it will be a critical mistake if we don't fill all the beauty criteria of the B round. This is why we need to make a lot of money. So I waited too much, I think, to generate revenues. It's a network effect. So you sell the output of the network. So if you don't have any network, you have nothing to sell. So, this is a chicken and egg effect. Now we have the network, we can sell, but it took time for us. A regret I would have probably is we took early on business contractors in the US and other places of the world that didn't really bring business to us. I wouldn't say they were bad at it, really not. I would say that we were not ready enough. We were not ripe enough to be sellable as such. So when you start the offensive, you have to be goddamn 100% ready. And we started a bit too early. So sometimes staffing too early some profiles is a mistake, because you will cash burn for not much efficiency. On the other hand, and we'll see this soon with the C-suite lineup, it's also a good thing sometimes to shoot early to get great result earlier than expected, because you have a good leadership team. So arbitration is a constant thing. You will make mistake, and I'm always happy to share our mistakes, specifically on the front of where did we burn cash that was unnecessary. Probably in legal, probably hiring too early some profile, sales profile probably. And then when you go in, really because you're ready, go pedal to the metal. there is only one burn stage in a rocket launch, right? You never see a rocket like we are midway into the flight and cancel, scrap it, land the thing, and we relaunch tomorrow. No, that just doesn't exist. When you enter the hard cash burn phase, you are pedal to the metal. There is no coming back. So you've got to be 100% ready, 100% aligned with the trajectory before you push this button, because there will be only one push.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the things that you mentioned about, the time it's taken to get where you are now, where you've actually got something to sell. So as a business owner coming from a purely sales background, and so much of what we do is measured by revenue, and there's less of the non-tangibles like you refer to. So a lot of the time I get instant gratification. Work hard, have a good quarter, you see the revenue. In your case, the last few years, you've not seen the revenue, but it's all been focusing on different areas within the business. How have you got that? How have you remained so focused and got that positive feedback loop? And what's been the gratification that you've had when you can't necessarily attach revenue to the hard work and the success that you've been having?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. So it's a twofold thing. So there is the fact that this younger generation of talents, and I'm not speaking like the very young one, as of 30 already, you can feel it. They don't want to be an employee anymore. It's over. This time is over. Look at every nation age pyramid, and they are going like this. They shrink at the bottom, meaning there are less active people, and there will be less and less and less active people. This is an inflationary force. Sorry. And by the way, those talents, they are selling themselves at a higher price because they know there is a shortage. So how do you get them? How do you attract them? How do you keep them? Well, you give them shares. You give them ESOPs, you give them stock options, whatever you name it. They have to be part of your business as much as you are. And they want to be sure that the day you sell it, the day you make the heist a reality, they will be millionaires, right? And they can live on this promise for a while, as long as you're nailing some of the objectives, like growing the company value, getting your VC fundraising, starting to see momentum in the sales traction, and so on. They will just feed on this already, saying, okay, I'm in for 5 years. I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I avoid turnover with that, and I can attract talents. And also the remote first thing is really critical to them because they want to preserve their family life and so on. So this is one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is you cannot only feed them on the heist. You cannot only feed them on the fact that one day they'll get rich, because mind you, most people don't consider this as a strong driver in their life. Yes, they want to make money, but it's not as important as having a purpose in life. And it's true for this younger generation. The X generation was extremely receptive to money. The newer generation, Y and further, they are extremely receptive to having a purpose in life, specifically in this world changing constantly and with climate change and all the political instability and so on. They want to make a difference. So what we tell them is like, okay, this is a heist, but this is a Robin Hood heist. We are making a software that is open source, that will outlive us by decades, that will be taken over by companies, by other groups, by cybersecurity experts, angels, whatever. People will maintain what we created for decades to protect themselves, to protect each other. So we're in a race to make a lot of money on the back of cyber criminals, not on the back of the good people. So there is a Robin Hood aspect to what we're doing. And everybody waking up in the morning is like, okay, I work for myself, I'm going to make a heap of money, and my job makes sense. And I think it's the trio that makes us successful in this direction.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Again, the Robin Hood analogy. You've got a very unique way of explaining things, Philippe. Cool. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. So given where you are, you've described your business model as a high. So revenue hasn't been, like one of the things to really shout about right now in terms of where you're at in your journey. You're at your Series A. You've had over 20 million in funding. Yeah, over the last 12 months or so, you've had a big focus on bringing in the C-suite. So there's yourself, you've got a CMO, you've got a chief sales officer, a CTO, and a COO. Given where you're at in terms of revenue, the stage in the journey, where you're at in the market, some would say that that's like quite soon to have such an established C-suite and well-built C-suite. So I wanted to understand, so like, what's your thought process behind getting these key hires in so soon, particularly at where you're at from a revenue perspective, and how do you think that's going to enable you to scale and push on to the next phases of growth?
Yeah, well, we need to have revenues and we need to grow them to build them up. So it's in a good way now, but it requires very specific profiles. And we're talking about the sales team and the sales-led growth. It's not something you improvise. You need people that are very good at that can build a team, and rein them in, because the sales are not the easiest people to actually manage, as we all know. And also, we co-founded with a CTO and a COO. And I would say like it's a good way of co-founding. You have a CEO, a CTO, CO, or CMO or CSO, but at least try to fit 2 of the 5 C-suites as soon as you can with the founders, and be sure about them. And then you need to complete the lineup with 2 more profiles. Here for us, it was a CMO and a CSO. So myself, I was CMO for quite a long time in life, 10 years. So I had notions, more than notions in this field. So I can build up the team, build up the first momentum and so on. But what we all look for is to replace ourselves. If you are realistic enough, if you look at yourself, you're not the best. I'm not the best. And we CEO tend to think we are the best at a lot of things, but actually, factually, we're not. We are jacks of all trades. And what we want is to be efficient. So at some point, you take one step back and you're like, okay, someone is a better CMO than I am. And it's Courtney. This guy is super experimented, and he is reining the team in a new direction, giving new ideas, new content, and that is paying off like 10 times. It's extremely important that you accept to delegate and you accept to be in your role as a CEO, at least, is to take the strategic vision, strategic overview, and cast the right decision, because you will be the only one that would be held accountable for that. So you have to have a lot of your time focusing on the strategy and the macro overview. And if you are constantly, brought back to the ground to taking decision and handling the teams and so on, you're not in the right posture. So that's why, as soon as you can, expand your lineup so that people that are better than you at every field in the game are actually handling their teams. And this is how you scale. You cannot be everywhere constantly. I used to be a CEO slash CMO slash CSO all at the same time. I was not good at the 3 of them, right? And where I was supposedly good, being CEO, I was not as good as I used to, because I was handling too many chairs. And the VCs came to me, and one of them specifically from Supernova, and told me like, Philippe, do whatever you want, but be our CEO for God's sake, right? So recruit the people that would be replacing you in CMO and CSO position. I was hesitant not to take them. I was hesitant money-wise. But since the VC is telling me, do it, I was like, okay, fine. We'll agree at the end that it should be done. So the VC are hardly the ones slowing you down to build up your lineup, and you will get great people, better than you are, and obviously with more time in their mind and in their day to handle specifically one task. So in the end, they will be better than you at it.
What you've just said there about your reluctance to hire from a cost perspective, it's a conversation I'm having a lot. I speak with founders who are very cost savvy. I'm speaking with investors that are wanting the founders to spend the money. And we hosted an event a few weeks back, and one of the panelists, a chap called Usman, one of the things he said is you're never going to build $1 billion company by saving money. So you've got to invest into the people. One of the things I wanted to ask you, the self-awareness there to know that, Courtney's a better CMO than you, and in fact, you can't spin all the different plates at the same time and be effective and do a good job. That kind of self-awareness, would you say you had that kind of self-awareness and also the ability to set your ego aside and bring people in that are better at the job than you earlier on in your career, or do you think that's something that you've developed over the years?
That's a good question. I'd say you have to have an ego as a founder. It's part of the job. So it's something you have to tinker with, deal with. Actually, the self-awareness for me came from the health front. So when I started to
burn out, health.
Yeah. So when I started to burn out the candle from the 2 sides, I had like heart issues. I was like missing a beat, whatever. And the cardiologists were like, man, you fit. There's no problem, right? The problem is in your mind. I'm like, no, I know how to handle stress. I've been doing this all my whole life. You're like, or do I? And you start thinking twice about the fact that you get signals from your body telling you, maybe you're not where you should be, and maybe you're not doing the right thing, and maybe you should start delegating. Maybe you should not have on your back all the problems of the company, just the one you can solve. And this is a moment.
And time off.
Yeah.
Time off.
Yeah.
Is like, I get it myself, and I know when I'm burning out, get short tempered. Everyone else suffers around me, so that's when I need to right, time off. But okay, well, that's good, and it's good that you develop that self-awareness.
Yeah, and ego-wise, it's super good that your co-founder are your equals, no matter if you're a CEO or not, because my CTO can come to me and tell me, hey, Philippe, you're doing shit. What you're doing now is not the right thing. You're not taking the right decision. You're tired or whatever. Get your head straight and go back to it. So I need this reality check from my COO, from my CTO, and it's actually a rule I've regulated. Usually people tell you not to associate with friends. My CTO is someone that I've been working with for 15 years and he's a friend. And my CEO is my wedding witness, and the godfather of my kid is someone I know for 25 years. So, but the good thing in this is we are very careful with each other to protect each other. And in the words we use with each other, but also we can give each other a reality check transparently, right? You're tired, go on vacation, or you should not be doing this. It's not your role, and so on. So that the transparency and the direct feedback when you're a CEO is really critical.
Yeah, and I think having that healthy tension between you and your business partners and your co-founders, and that not having artificial harmony. I think what you just described there is that your co-founders can be direct because it comes from a good place, and you all want the same thing. So yeah, it's really good to hear. Now, I suppose to start bringing the conversation to a bit of a close, then just wrapping up on building out your C-suite. What's been your philosophy when it's come to hiring? I know it wasn't necessarily something you were driving at this stage. It was, your investors were keen on bringing people in to help scale and to support you in your role. But what's been your philosophy when it's come to hiring, particularly at that C level, when you're hiring big people like your CMO, your chief sales officer? If I think from as a recruiter's perspective, the average tenure for a sales leader, like VP sales, CRO, in the current market is 18 months. So many people get it wrong. And if you think about the level of investment that goes into, hiring a CRO or VP sales or chief sales officer, 18 months, it's hard to think about whether you're getting any bang for your buck there. But what's your philosophy been when you've been hiring individuals at this level?
So I think backcasting is so much superior to forecasting, for a startup at least. Because if you do forecasting, you are here, you take some variables, you tinker with them, and you say, I should be here if I knock out my targets and so on. So I fix my budget and my objective as being those. In a startup environment, there are just too many variables that are unknown to you or not yet dry. So backcasting is a better path. I want to be here. I'm here currently. What target should I knock backward, from the result to where I am now, to be sure to be on my flight path and correctly aligned with my flight path.
So reverse engineer the goal.
Absolutely. Because there's just too many variables for you to consider to be accurate in the forecasting environment, honestly. And this is actually appreciate this transparency. So if you're laser focused on your results and you're backcasting, you know where you are weak at any moment in time, right? And it then becomes very obvious that we were not the best sales in the world. So we needed a CSO. And it was also very obvious that we needed to have a different gear in CMO, someone that would spend 110% of their brain to it, not 30% like I was doing. So those two became very obvious. On top of that, my CTO is extremely well seated where he is. There's nothing to change here. My CEO is extremely well seated where he is. So those two seats were very obvious very early on. And they were actually part of the plan as of day one. Now, how do we do it? We have a very strict recruitment process, like it's terrible, it's really hard. So we recruit by sourcing the profiles. It's already pre-filtered by our partner, here you. And then we get only the cream. Out of the cream, we do 1-2 interviews prior to taking them eventually to a golden buzzer stage. The golden buzzer is exactly what it stands for, like in a talent show. You would need to have the 3 votes of the 3 co-founders to be able to be hired, right? And this is a moment where we have a rolling fire of questions from everyone, including the candidate, to see if we have a fit and no doubt about it. And then eventually, then you get hired into the company. So this is this is just a process, actually. There's no magic here. Look where you look what your plan look like. Look where there's a knot that is really important that you untie with someone better than you are at it. And then be extremely strict on the recruitment process. I cannot stress enough that if you have a dot, there's no dot. Skip and take the next one until you find the exact right fit without the slightest doubt in your mind. Because every mistake you will make, specifically in CMO, CSO, like you said, this is something you build up over time. So if you make a mistake and you find out this is a mistake 6 months later, you will have lost 6 months on something that is already taking 18 months before it's efficient. So you're years in before you have
the opportunity cost is huge. And there's a saying that I've always lived by when it's come to hiring is, if there's doubt, there's no doubt. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Philippe, so to like I said, bringing the conversation to a close, I think, I always like to end the conversation just a little bit more about yourself. We've talked about your career, we've talked about your business, we've talked about hiring, we've talked about, the problem that you're solving, and, really enjoyed learning more about yourself and Crowdsec. But it'd be good to know a little bit about you and who you are when you're not in work. So I suppose, tell us what is it you like to do when you're not building Crowdsec?
So I'm a tinkerer at heart. So I like to do a DIY project, creating drones, racing drones, stunt drones that I create myself. I like to fix my pinballs. I have a collection of pinballs at home that I'm very fond of. And I like also to be connected with nature. So basically horse riding, because when you have like 500 kilos of muscle between your legs, you are not at liberty of thinking about your next closure or next deal or next campaign. You have to be in the moment. And we tend to project ourselves on the long term a lot. This is our job, right? So sometimes reconnecting to just hands-on job right away, you cannot think to anyone else. When you fly a drone that is 150 kilometers per hour, you are not at liberty of thinking, oh, damn, what do we eat tonight? You have to be in the moment right now. And this is my passions are all around those. I need to be in the moment and disconnect from planning long term, because our brains as CEOs think constantly in the long term, and we need to reconnect with the short term.
Yeah, I'm the same. Weekend to spend, exercising or going out on my mountain bike, or I'm not quite that confident on a horse, but I'll jump on a motorbike and go for a blast up into the hills. So it's the same, when you just clear your mind, focus at one thing that's in front of you, and just forget about anything else. So it's good to hear that you've got your own devices when it comes to escaping. I think given your experience, given your career, given the journey that you've been on over the last 15, 20 years, it'd be good to understand, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self if you were starting out again? You just graduated from university again, and you're looking to go out into the big bad world. What advice would you be giving yourself right now?
Stop rushing, but trust yourself. So on the one hand, don't rush into every opportunity, because you're going to spend a lot of energy into nothingness. And on the other hand, trust yourself. If you have an instinct that this is a big shot, this is the thing you should do, try it, and try it early on, because this is the best moment in your life to be an entrepreneur. There are just 2 spots where you can really be an entrepreneur with your mind free. Out of school, when you don't have a loan, a wife, a kid, or a husband or kid or whatever, you don't have any constraints. This is the best moment to hyper focus on developing your career and your business. And when you are safe from arm's way, so being around 40, you already have a bit of money aside. If you fail, it's not much of a problem. So those are the only 2 windows of opportunity when your mind will be as free as it gets to be an entrepreneur. So to your young self, tell yourself that this is the best moment in your life to be an entrepreneur. This world is ever changing, is offering opportunity constantly. There are things to be renovated, changed, and moved. And VCs, they will follow you. If you have a great idea and you can show that you can deliver, they will follow you no matter how young you are, because they will understand that there is a driver behind you that is, big enough for them to make a multiplier. And they will help you build it eventually if they see you're weak on the experience side. So don't hesitate, out of school, be entrepreneurs. If this is your profile, if this is what you have in your guts, go for it.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I think early 20s, just graduated from uni, had a couple of years as employed, and I got an opportunity presented to myself, and I got a promotion on the Monday. I met with someone on the Tuesday, and I got the opportunity presented to me, and I quit on the Friday. And my thought process was, I don't have any kids. I've just bought my first house. The worst thing that can happen is I'll end up back at my mum's in the spare room, and I could deal with that. I had a few sleepless nights throughout the week, but yeah, I went for it, and then the rest is history. So yeah, it definitely resonates with me, particularly the sort of fresh out of uni, early stages of your career. And then, final question from me then: what's the best piece of advice that you've been given, and who was it by?
That's not an easy one. There is so much I get from the others. I would say recently I fell on this podcast that was talking about the SLG and PLG strategy, and I absolutely loved it. This is something that cleared out my mind around what are the differences in between the two. And if you give me 1 second, or make an edit later on, I'll give you the exact name of it. And that was recently, actually, it was the best piece of advice I had from this podcast, because the SLG versus PLG strategy is something I've been, fighting on in my brain. It's Lenny's podcast, right? And the girl's name is Elena Verna, and she made a piece around the ultimate guide to product-led sales. And that was probably the most enlightening conversation not, but the most enlightening part I heard for a long while. I love the pearls of wisdom that are in this one.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, if you fire that over, it'd be good to we can share that with anyone listening that wants to check it out. But Philip, listen, I suppose to wrap things up, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I love your energy. I love the way that you explain complicated things in simple terms. I love the way that you describe your business as a heist, more of a Robin Hood heist. It's been great to learn more about your products, about your journey. And I wish you all the success in achieving your goals. I know obviously you're working closely with the team, and we can hopefully get you there from a talent perspective. But yeah, I wish you all the best. Thoroughly enjoyed the time, and I hope you did too.
Well, thank you, Adam. Yeah, it was a great moment together. And Strive is part of our success, because when you hire those key roles for us, and we didn't make any mistakes so far on those, you make a difference. And actually, as I told you, one of the best outcome we had recently was the Academy, which is both a success on the community front and the CMO front. And both of them came from you guys. Thank you for that.
Well, I'll take that. Thanks, Philip. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want more information about the podcast, head over to our website, Scale with Strive.